Russian hacker. I hack you, I hack your sister, I hack your brother, and I hack your cousin Elmo. I hack anybody I can hack. Oh, right now we're talking about logical thinking test. And what's on that, how to prepare for that. So we better get busy. I hack the elections later. I'll work on that. All right. So 3 major areas you want to be aware of. You like this neon board? Me too. Critical thinking, right? Critical thinking. And remember we talked about that a little bit in a lecture way back when. Doesn't necessarily mean negative thinking. Might mean asking myself about my own premises, looking at my own arguments, looking at my own evidence, and, as we said, Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. That doesn't mean to go and, take a huge bottle of pills and off yourself if you haven't been doing much of it, but I can tell you, I've been watching you. There are a few of you who haven't been doing very much of this. So that means that I'm going to take a hard look not only at the arguments that are waged against my argument, but at my own argument and how well it holds up. I'm going to examine that evidence. So if I asked you, how would you define critical thinking? You probably ought to acknowledge that idea, as well as others that you've run across, and as well as your own applications. But of course, here, as well as everywhere, I'm going to look for evidence. I'm going to look for, have you supported your point? If I ask you to write a paragraph or more about critical thinking and support what that is, then you would have to have that enter into the picture. Yeah, you can't claim that there's a huge caravan coming to storm our southern borders and claim, on the one hand, that these people are riddled with diseases, from chickenpox to rubella, whatever that is. But, oh, by the way, all the guys are buff and hale and hearty, and they're going to be terrorists-like people. Well, it wouldn't take much critical thinking to absolutely disassemble many of these fallacious, superficial arguments, right? Okay, so critical thinking has to do with analytical thinking, sharp thinking, use of words that is precise, and our attempt to be tolerant, our attempt to allow opposition viewpoints to influence us, right? To give them a fair hearing. Now, if they are shot full and full of outright lies, and if they are absolutely shot full and full of stereotypes, racist prejudices, and so on, that doesn't mean, well, yes, we're going to say that that's equal to a position which is a moderate and rational position. Because it's not. Okay? Because it's not. All right. So, critical thinking. So, and then we talked about logic in terms of induction and deduction, and you were given many examples of that. This is something that's ongoing. If you go to buy a car or what have you, use induction when you test drive all those cars. You take them off the lot. Okay? And test drive that Prius. I'm going to test drive that Chevy Volt or whatever it is. And then arrive at tentative conclusions, right? So this is a hypothetical situation, but the more evidence and the stronger link between the evidence and the conclusion, then the firmer the conclusion can be, right, in induction. But the conclusion in induction, we said this before, is what? Tell me about this. What is it? What did you say? Never certain. I think I heard you say that. That's right. On the other hand, deduction claims, what'd you say? Certainty? Yeah. Deduction claims certainty. That is, it's a closed box, right? If we say, that all taxpayers must submit their forms by April 15th, in this case 2019, or be charged a late penalty, or perhaps even prosecuted. That's a major premise, right? I am a taxpayer minor premise. Therefore, if I wish to avoid penalties and whatnot, I have to submit those forms by that date. If that is the rule, because deduction is rule of government, right? So if you take induction, this should not be confusing for you, but if you take induction and you've arrived over many, many trials and many, many examples at a firm conclusion, then that, for you anyway, at least becomes deductive. Because if I go back to buying my car and that argument, if in this situation, I have decided I want a fuel-efficient hybrid car based on my test drives and research, then that becomes, in essence, a deductive proposition by that time. So by that time, I am shopping for a hybrid vehicle. The Toyota Prius is a hybrid vehicle. Therefore, I will at least take a hard look at this vehicle. So, I mean, that's basically the way it works. But you know, the big deal in connecting this with critical thinking, and I love that pink, with critical thinking, is that it's a matter of doing a major form of critical thinking when you say to yourself, to anyone else, to the Russian hacker or whoever it happens to be, wait a minute, I want to take a closer look at your premise and your conclusion, because oftentimes those premises, as we said before, are suppressed, they are hidden, they are kept down, they are misrepresented oftentimes. And so if we look at the major premise, then we have an argument that we can fairly dismantle and show to be riddled with fallacies, because we've shown that the major premise is itself very, very questionable at best. So there's so many of these. I mean, we can list them on and on and on. I mean, if you, for example, if a sitting president says, in effect, well, you know, I asked Vladimir Putin if he had been interfering in our elections. He says, no. What do you want me to do? Should I do anything else? That seems to be it. Are you kidding me? Are you serious? Well, the major premise is that you ask the accused whether or not the accused individual has committed the act. And if the accused denies it, you say, oh, well, there's not much more I can do. Well, no, there certainly is much more that can be done in a situation like that. So the major premise is off in that argument. You know, the major premise could be stated in essence. It is perfectly acceptable to excuse an accused individual based on that person's own testimony. This person testified that he had not interfered or was innocent, therefore he is innocent. Wow. So using critical thinking, it doesn't really take much to dismantle some of these arguments, right? Okay, well, enough said on that. Enough said on critical thinking. This is just a short review by a Russian hacker. All right, so we get to the third area that I want you to be aware of. That is basic logical fallacies. I found a really fine list for you, which I'm going to share with you, including the one that we have violated most often, and that is hasty generalization. You know, I'm not doing my own critical thinking if I allow myself a great many hasty generalizations. So that seems to be the worst offender. You know, for example, if I'm in an English 101B class, I'm writing a paper and I say, everyone in the story was respectful of the protagonist, Emily Grierson. Well, not everyone. No, we don't know that that's the case. You right? So whenever we use this everyone, always, no, you know. Well, everyone's for peace. Sometimes we say, really? Everyone? Not the people that hacked up that American Washington Post journalist, Khashoggi. I mean, they weren't very peaceful people. Evidently, they strangled him after he walked in the door and dismembered him. At least that's the indication at this point. You can't just say, oh, well, let's just see what might happen. It requires investigation, I would say. I mean, that's my position. Okay, so anyway, there we go. If I include logical fallacies on a test, here's what I'm going to do. I'll give you an example of one. And I'll ask you, based on, in this case, we have a list of 15, very clearly explained and I think pretty easy to identify in most cases. Sometimes a little difficult because there are some that are fairly close to each other, but you would identify the fallacy in that case. For example, if I say something like Ted Cruz's parents were involved in the assassination of JFK, and I call him Lying Ted, and I happen to be one of the most egregious liars on the planet, and I lie every 5 minutes myself, or more often. In any case, if I throw that ad hominem, and you could say I threw an ad hominem just now at another major liar who called Cruz a liar. Well, it seems in both cases the description might be somewhat accurate. Nonetheless, if I'm going to totally disqualify that person based on simply calling them a liar or what have you, I theoretically am using an ad hominem attack. That is, attack on the person instead of the issues. And of course, when candidates don't even raise the issues, then we have a whole other situation. They talk about each other's physical attributes, or this a woman's lack of being prepossessingly beautiful, and so on. Then we're doing all this ad hominem. It has nothing to do with any sort of issue, as you well know. Okay, so that's basically, I didn't really use my board here a whole lot, but hope you enjoyed it, but I'm going to use it a little bit now. Whoa! Watch out for cords. Oh my goodness. So 3 areas. Critical thinking is one area. Get my pen working. Critical thinking is one, and we have logic in terms of induction and deduction, knowing how to define and demonstrate the difference and recognize the difference, and furthermore, being able to get at what we call an enthymeme, that is, an argument that has a suppressed premise, being able to pick that up. Then we have the use of fallacies. And being able to identify them. But you know what? None of this means anything, really, if you have not applied them to your own thinking. Really, what I'm trying to have happen here is not, oh, you passed a test with flying colors, but when you're writing an essay, you sit down and you think about, wait a minute, I'm going to apply all these principles and the principles of rhetoric as discussed to generate an essay that commands respect for my mind. Right? That's what I'm after. Yes, well-chosen words, eloquence, thought-provoking, but above all, that I have claimed respect for the power of my ingenuity and thinking as I put those words on that page. And that puts it in the context of not just going through the motions, right? Okay, I'm going to say so long for now. It was nice visiting with you, and I will talk with you again soon. I got to go back to hacking.